What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Arrival Entertainment, and it is officially the month of October, which means it is officially
Halloween season.
Every year around this time of the year, I say to myself I want to do some Halloween-themed videos, but then things get in the way and then I end up not doing them. And for the past couple of years, there have been a set of horror movies that I've been meaning to check out, but I keep putting them off for one reason or another. And those set of movies just happen to be Rob Zombie's movies. I've been meaning to check out his movies all the way through for a couple years now. I've seen bits and parts here and there of some of his other movies. The only ones I've really seen all the way through are his Halloween movies, but with his new movie, The Munsters, that just came out this past week, I thought it'd be a good time to go through all of his written and directed movies and possibly do a ranking video, so that's what this video is going to be doing. This is going to be my personal ranking of all of his movies, including The Munsters. A few disclaimers before I get started, just like always. Like I mentioned, this is my personal ranking. I know people are very opinionated about Rob Zombie and his movies, but just like every list that I do and every other list on YouTube, it's just my personal opinion, so let me know at the end of the video how you would rank all of his films. And I should mention that this video is only going to be covering his written and directed films, mainly because while I was going through his movies, like right in the middle of going through his movies, I had no idea that he directed an animated movie called The Haunted World or something or whatever. I don't remember the last part of it. And I didn't get a chance to look for that movie or to watch it, so I'm only going to be covering his written and directed movies. That movie he didn't write, he just directed it. So I decided, screw it, I'll just make it his written and directed movies. So without further ado, let's get started with what I consider Rob Zombie's worst horror movie. And in my opinion, that movie just so happens to be 31. For me, this movie was really tough to get through. I became more accustomed to Rob Zombie's directing style when I checked out House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, and I even knew about his directing style a little bit when I checked out the Halloween films. But this is his directing style at its absolute worst, in my opinion. Which is unfortunate for me because the beginning of the movie actually grabbed my attention and I was interested in. It started off with Richard Brake's character known as Doomhead. He's doing this opening monologue while he's got this priest tied up in this dingy dungeon somewhere, and his monologue is great. Just, he's such a captivating actor. I'm going to be talking about him a little bit more throughout this video, but his performance in 31, and especially in the beginning of the movie, I was all on board with. I was like, okay, this is a good opening. But then as soon as the opening credits ended, we're brought in with terrible characters, and there's some Rob Zombie regular actors in the opening here after the credits, but they're all poorly written this time around. None of them are giving really good performances. Even they've given up good performances in some of his other films, but I don't know what happened here because besides Richard Brake, every performance in this movie is just either meh or pretty terrible. And there's of course the typical Rob Zombie tropes that we're used to at this point. Over-the-top swearing and dialogue, which is at its absolute worst here. Horrible cinematography. The cinematography in this movie is so nauseating. It is littered with shaky cam, and I've talked about shaky cam a lot on this channel. You guys, if you've seen my videos, you know I can't stand shaky cam. I was able to tolerate it with some of his other films, but here, it's like the only direction that he was given was just shake the camera. That's it, just shake it. Don't add any flair or style to it. Just make the person watching nauseating as possible. And I don't know why he went back to that directing style because his film before 31, The Lords of Salem, had no shaky cam in it at all. It was all nice, steady, wide shots, and that was great. But here, he just goes back to shaking the camera, and it just cheapened the movie overall. Where it worked with House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, it just didn't work here. In fact, that's the main thing that I can describe 31 as. His first two films, House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, was a hit with audience members. So he tried to replicate that style here with 31, only on a more extreme level, and like I've said before, nothing really worked about it here. Even the concept of this movie just feels stale. It's just a bunch of people getting kidnapped by what seems like these rich British people, and they have to survive this game of 31 with killer clowns chasing him and trying to kill him throughout the movie. Like, that premise has been done before, but I was thinking at least Rob Zombies should be at least unique and flashy and more extreme, and while it is, it's done in all the wrong ways possible. So much so that when the film ended, the only thing that I liked in this movie was Richard Brake's character. He is the best of the killer clowns, and he's given the best performance in this movie. I think Richard Brake is a seriously underrated actor, but there wasn't enough of him in this movie. He, like I said, he dragged me in during the very beginning before the opening credits, then he disappears for about an hour, and by the time he comes back, it started to grab my interest a little bit more, but it was at the point where I just lost interest in the rest of the movie. So yeah, 31 is, I think, his worst movie. It didn't do anything for me. The only thing I liked was Richard Brake's performance in the film. Never have to watch it again. Next up at number 7 is Halloween 2. Now, I've talked about the Halloween films quite a bit on my channel, and I've mentioned Rob Zombie's Halloween films a little bit here and there, so I'll keep the Halloween films brief when I get to them. But I will say his Halloween movies are frustrating, because at one point, when Rob Zombie did his movies, the franchise was kind of like at a crossroads. Halloween Resurrection didn't do well financially or with critics and audiences, so they didn't know what to do with the franchise after that. Mustafa Akkad eventually passed away, so his son Malik Akkad took over, and they thought Rob Zombie could breathe some new life and take the series in a new direction because of his first 2 films that he did, and Rob Zombie was just told to just make these films his own, do whatever you want to do with it, especially Halloween 2. And boy, did he succeed in that, for better or worse. No matter what you think about his Halloween films, he did make it his own, and he did try to take the series in a new direction. Whether or not that direction works or not is definitely in the eye of the beholder. For me, parts of it worked, especially with Halloween 2. In some regards, I want to put Halloween 2 above his first one, because it does do new things. It's not just a complete rehash of Halloween 2, but at the same time, there's a lot in this film that just make me question, why did you do that? And I should mention that I watched the theatrical cuts of his films, because those are the cuts that I prefer. I mean, there are parts in the unrated version that I kind of like as well, but overall, the theatrical cuts are just much better versions of these movies, in my opinion. And especially with Halloween 2. Like, with Halloween 2, it's more of a character study. Rob Zombie decided to do more of a character study while incorporating Halloween and horror tropes in it, which I think is a cool idea. Even though I'm not a fan of Scout Taylor Compton's performance as Laurie Strode in this movie, I do like the idea of seeing someone that went through the stuff that she went through, having to deal with it, having to deal with the aftermath 1 year later, but for some reason 2 years later in the director's cut. And in the theatrical cut, it's like Laurie is still like trying to keep it all together. She's doing her best to keep it all together, but then as the film goes along, she just slowly starts to lose her mind and just unravel completely, to the part where she just blows up at Annie towards the end of the movie. But the thing is, with the unrated cut, she's already unraveled and becomes a hot mess in the beginning of the movie, so seeing that decline in the unrated cut, in my opinion, doesn't really hold that much of an impact. There's some good visuals in this movie. I really like Annie and Sheriff Brackett in this movie. I thought they're focused a lot more on this movie, and I think they're better handled in this film than they were in the first one. They weren't bad in the first one, but I do like that they focused a little bit more on them in this film. I may be controversial too, but I don't mind the hobo Michael Myers look. I think it's something different that we haven't seen before, because it does make sense. Michael only kills on Halloween, so in real life he would be homeless. He, can't just be in a coma every year until Halloween rolls around. But that's about where the stuff that I like kind of ends. And the rest of it is, like I said, frustrating, because I can see what he's going for. And sometimes it's just hard for me to accept whether I like it or not. For instance, the whole ghost mom thing. A lot of people really did not like this, and I'll admit I hated it when I first saw it too, but over repeat viewings, I see more what Rob Zombie was going for, and I'm able to accept it a little bit more watching it all these years later. However, it's too much like Friday the 13th, but I'll give it credit. It hasn't been done before in the franchise. And that's how I feel about his Halloween films. There's aspects of it that are interesting, and I could get behind if they were done a little bit better, but then there's other aspects that are just typical Rob Zombie stuff that didn't work here. Besides that stuff, we're back to the typical obnoxious, annoying characters with over-the-top swearing, just loudmouth people that you just hate. But, you know, if you don't care for any of the characters, then why should you care about the overall story? I mean, the only characters I like were Annie and Sheriff Brackett, and spoiler alert, when Annie does die in this movie, it's probably my favorite part of the movie. Seeing Laurie, you know, completely break down, and, you know, she loses her friendship with Annie because of when she finds out that she's Michael's brother, and then she comes home and her best friend is bleeding and dying in a bathroom, and she's like trying to get her to stay with her, but then she dies in her arms. It's pretty tragic and well handled. And again, I feel like I'm being repetitive here, but that's all I really have left to say about his Halloween films. There's good ideas and stuff in them, but the execution just doesn't always work. So with all that being said, you could probably guess what my next one is, and that is his first Halloween film. This, I do think, is a better movie overall. It sometimes flip-flops, because like I said, whereas this one is more of Rob Zombie doing his own thing in the beginning of the movie, but then the second half is more of a remake of the original Halloween movie. Halloween 2 was just an original concept all the way through. So it flip-flops between which one is better, in my opinion, but when I went through them for this ranking, this one was the better one to get through overall. It feels like what you would expect a Rob Zombie directed Halloween film to be. Rob Zombie has his directing style. He definitely applies that in this movie, but it feels more of a Halloween film than Halloween 2 did. And this one is just as frustrating as Halloween 2 is, because again, I can see where he's coming from with certain things here and there, but the execution just doesn't always work. The beginning of this movie, it's really tough to get through. And, you know, I have no problems with swearing. Swearing doesn't offend me or anything, but how the characters talk in this movie just is laughably embarrassing. Rob Zombie was going more for Michael was brought up to be a killer. He wasn't born a killer like he was in the original films. So for him to go through the nature versus nurture thing, he decided to have Michael grow up with an abusive stepfather, a stripper mom, a slutty sister, and they all hate each other. They're all yelling, white trash characters, swearing every 5 seconds, and it doesn't work. It's very, very annoying. I mean, that's what all of his characters are like. All of his characters are just obnoxious characters that have over-the-top swearing and, you know, cringy dialogue. There's quite a bit of cringy dialogue in both of his Halloween films. And, you know, he tried to make Laurie Strode likable in here, but I guess I'm just not a fan of Scout Taylor Compton. I've seen her in interviews before, and I've seen her podcasts that she's done with Danielle Harris a couple times, and she seems like a cool person, but her performance in these films just doesn't work for me. And I've seen a couple of her performances from other films, and she just doesn't win me over, which is a shame because, like I said, she does seem like a cool person. I do, however, like Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis. I thought that was pretty good casting. Yeah, it's a little weird seeing Alex from A Clockwork Orange play Dr. Loomis, but he does give a good performance, and he's one of the few characters that, you know, wasn't ruined by over-the-top cringy dialogue. He's got some bits of dialogue here and there that's just like, wait, what? But it's not completely ruined. At least for me, it doesn't ruin the character. His character was absolutely ruined in Halloween 2, where he just became an asshole who just wanted to sell more books, but, you know, at least in this film, he wasn't ruined too much, at least for me. Overall, I've talked about his Halloween films enough, and I'm going to be talking about them a little bit more when I do my last Halloween ranking video once Halloween Ends comes out. So I'll just leave them here as I rewatched them. I can get through them a lot better than I have in the past. They're not great movies. They're frustrating movies because, again, I can see where he's coming from and what he's doing. The execution just isn't all there. So I kind of felt like I had to put them at the bottom of the list because of that. But I don't hate them like I used to. Next up at number 5, we have 3 from Hell. A lot of people have talked a lot about 3 from Hell in the past, mainly because people really like his first 2 films, House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. Devil's Rejects had a great ending for these characters. Then he made a sequel to that called 3 from Hell, so how does that work out? Without spoiling it, Devil's Rejects kind of closed the door to continuing with these characters. So how do you bring them back? And I was curious about that too. And it was one of those things where I'm just like, okay, I mean, yeah, they gave an explanation, but I don't really buy that. It's the best way I could put it without spoiling it. But whatever, these characters are back. Where are they going to go next? What are they going to do with them? And the end result is fine. 3 from Hell isn't great. I wouldn't even consider it good. It feels more like a fan fiction of these characters. We had the first 2 films that were liked pretty much by the public, and they did well financially. But like I said, Devil's Rejects kind of closed the door to continuing with these characters, and now 3 from Hell, at times it feels like a fan fiction project. They're back and they're doing this and they're doing that, but Sid Haig unfortunately passed away, so we have to bring in a new character played by Richard Brake, which I was like, okay, that's a smart move. I like Richard Brake a lot, and he's good in this movie. He's playing another psycho killer, of course, but he's good at it. And it is good seeing Bill Moseley and Sherry Moon Zombie back as their characters. These characters are terrible people, but for some reason they're sort of likable. I liked seeing these characters on screen, even though they're psycho killers. It's weird how Rob Zombie did that. But the whole movie, we're just following them as they're on the run after they broke out of prison. They eventually go to Mexico, where they hide out for the rest of the movie. And that stuff in Mexico is kind of hit and miss. Some of it's entertaining. Some of it's just like, okay, let's just get on with it. And what broke the movie for me, well, not broke it, but what made me put it a little bit lower than before, or than his other films, was the ending. The ending kind of felt open-ended, like maybe he has another sequel planned, but he went ahead and said after this film came out that he doesn't have anything planned for these characters. So the ending just kind of feels like, you brought back your characters, you put them in this new situation, and you don't even give them a definitive ending. And so I just looked back on the rest of the film and just said to myself, why did you bring back these characters? They had a good ending in Devil's Rejects, and you don't have another sequel planned out, but you don't give them a definitive ending here. I guess it's frustrating. I don't want to use that word again because I used it a lot with the Halloween films, but I gotta be honest, it is pretty frustrating. There are parts of the movie that is entertaining and well made, even though it's very low budget, but then there's parts of the movie that just scream Rob Zombie-isms that are brought to the extreme, not as extreme as 31 in his Halloween films, but, they're still worth bringing up. If you don't like a certain directing style that a director has, then it's gonna annoy you when you watch his other films, but this one didn't annoy me as much. Although there were parts that I was just like, just get it over with. Just go away. Go off the screen. Overall, 3 from Hell is kind of a mixed bag. There's stuff that I like about it. There's stuff that I just didn't care for. Not necessarily didn't like or hated, just didn't care for all that much. The film does feel pretty pointless since there's no definitive end for these characters, but the journey is getting to that lackluster ending. It's pretty entertaining for the most part, so it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it, but you've seen his first 2 films. Just keep your expectations low. My next one at number 4, I don't know what people are going to say about me ranking this one at its spot, because a lot of people consider this one of his best films of all time, but the next one for me is House of a Thousand Corpses. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but for me, it was lacking a little bit for me to put it higher than a number 4 ranking. This was Rob Zombie's directorial debut. It was his first film introducing us to the Firefly family, and it's pretty good. I did enjoy watching this movie, but it just didn't leave that big of an impact on me like it did for a lot of other people. The main characters that get kidnapped by the Firefly family, I don't even remember them. They're pretty forgettable. They're pretty dull. Even though they're given some charisma, I just don't care for them at all. And if you don't care for your main protagonists, you're not really going to care that much about the overall plot. I've said that before, and it's apparent in this movie. But the Firefly family, like I said in my last one, They're terrible people, but they do have this likability factor to them. And I did enjoy watching them. The movie is actually very inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I saw a lot of similarities between this film and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it introduced me to Captain Spaulding, who I grew to love after watching this movie. This character is great. I love Sid Haig as this character. He's got such funny dialogue. I love the look of his clown look in this film. He just oozes likability, and I wish he was in the movie just a little bit more, but we got to see more of him in Devil's Rejects, so those two performances combined, I love this character. He's great. Sid Haig, rest in peace, Sid Haig. You helped create a really great character. And I guess I haven't talked that much about Sherry Moon Zombie in these movies so far, because she's in every single one of Rob Zombie's movies, and her character in this film, Devil's Rejects and 3 from Hell, they're kind of like her signature characters. She gets flack a lot for always appearing in Rob Zombie's movies, even though it doesn't bother me all that much. I mean, she's married to Rob Zombie. They both love each other. They both work well when they do their movies. And I like her character in these films. Her character, Baby, is pretty kooky and pretty entertaining. I just wish that for me, there was more likability to the main characters who were getting kidnapped, because those are the characters we're supposed to be rooting for to get out of this situation. And there isn't really. They're fine, I guess. They do the job, but you don't like them. You don't feel anything for them. There's not so much substance in between all the shocking horror aspects, which for me at least, I felt that. And that's kind of important when you're trying to make a film as shocking as this film is. And when you don't have that much substance in between, you're kind of left with just a gorehound movie with little impact towards the end of it. But nevertheless, it is pretty entertaining. I would watch this film again. In fact, I might have to watch this film again, because everyone swears this is one of his best movies, his masterpiece, some people call it. And I watched it and I was like, it's entertaining. I mean, the ending kind of sucked, but it's entertaining, but I wouldn't consider it one of his best films. Maybe I'll need to watch it again, but for right now, I thought it was fine. It was entertaining, not great, not terrible, just fine. Next is another similar one that I don't know how people are going to react to this one being so high on this list, but I gotta be honest with myself, I really enjoyed The Munsters. I heard a lot of bad buzz about this movie before it came out. I was going to pick up the Blu-ray either way to watch it, because I didn't want to watch it on Netflix for the first time. I want a physical copy of it, whether I liked it or not. But I still gave it a chance, and I liked it. I enjoyed it for the most part. I was so curious to see how Rob Zombie was going to handle a PG family comedy movie. And, you know, whether it worked for you or not, again, is up to the eye of the beholder. But I did find myself laughing at quite a bit in this film. I have a soft spot in my heart for dumb, quirky comedy, whether it's done intentionally dumb or unintentionally dumb. I do have a soft spot for that. And there were some dumb, quirky comedy moments in this film that I ended up laughing at. There are a lot of jokes that work too. This is mainly a comedy family film, and there are a lot of jokes that work. However, I will admit that there are some jokes that kind of fell flat. Like, for instance, when they're giving Herman Munster his name, you could tell it was trying to be built up as kind of like a laugh, but it just didn't. And even though some people had some mixed feelings about Jeff Daniel Phillips as Herman Munster, to me, he does have some funny moments in the film. He doesn't hold a candle to the original Munsters actor, Fred Gwynne. Looking at both of them side by side, Fred Gwynne is obviously the better Herman Munster, but I'm not gonna lie, Jeff Daniel Phillips, he did okay with what he was given. He's not great. I feel like mainly it's his voice. Fred Gwynne's performance as Herman Munster is so hard to replicate. They've tried it before with other Munsters projects, and from my knowledge, they haven't really worked all that well. And Jeff Daniel Phillips is another one where it doesn't quite work, but he does carry the spirit of Fred Gwynne's performance, which, in my opinion, is enough for this film. Daniel Roebuck as the Count, though, is probably the best performance in this movie. Everyone has been talking about this, and it's absolutely true. He really embodies the original Count from the original Munsters show. And I even enjoyed Sherry Moon Zombie as Lily. Yeah, I know a lot of people rolled their eyes when they're like, oh, of course she's going to play Lily, but she did a good job for the most part. You could feel that Rob Zombie and everyone involved does have a passion for the Munsters. It's just whether or not the film worked for you or not is, it's up to the eye of the beholder. And this might be another hot take, but I kind of liked how this movie looked. I liked the bright colors and the kind of cheapness look to it. I don't want to use that word because I do feel like there was some effort put into this film. But the way the film looked, I didn't mind it all that much. A lot of people are not liking that. A lot of people are wishing this movie was in black and white. And yeah, black and white would have helped a lot more because the original show was in black and white. But I did overall enjoy the bright colors of this film and the overall set design, the costumes. All that was really good. And going back to Richard Brake, he is in this film as the mad scientist that created Herman Munster. And seeing 2 films in a row where he plays this psycho killer that just terrifies you, it was kind of entertaining seeing him play a more laid-back, family-friendly mad scientist character. He did it pretty well. He was, again, very entertaining here. There are some parts that don't work, but for me, I did enjoy this movie overall. I did enjoy his version of the Munsters, even though I wouldn't consider it great or anything. I don't know if they're going to continue with this version of the Munsters. I don't know if Rob Zombie has a sequel planned or a TV show planned or anything like that. But if they came out saying Rob Zombie's going to continue with his world of the Munsters, I wouldn't mind seeing what he's got. So only time will tell with that, but for right now, I overall enjoyed the Munsters. Next at number 2 is The Devil's Rejects. This is mainly considered Rob Zombie's best movie to a lot of people, like his absolute best movie, and I can see why. This was a huge improvement for me over House of a Thousand Corpses. His dingy, grungy, disgusting type of directing style, over-the-top characters and dialogue is mainly present here in this movie. This was the movie that kind of gave birth to his directing style. There was a little bit of it in House of a Thousand Corpses, but Devil's Rejects fully embraces that. And where it doesn't work in movies like 31 and aspects of it doesn't work in his Halloween films, for some reason, it works very well here. Maybe it's because Rob Zombie built up this world with House of a Thousand Corpses and now building it up again with this film, so it was able to work more in this film. But for some reason, it didn't bother me all that much watching this one. And the Firefly family, Sherry Moon Zombie, Sid Haig, and Bill Moseley. Wow, I almost forgot his name. How could you forget Bill Moseley? But their performances are on top form here. Again, these are terrible characters, but Rob Zombie gives them this likability factor that you just like watching them, even though you're not supposed to be liking them. And I liked seeing them interact off each other a lot more in this film. It was good seeing Sid Haig's character interact a lot more with Sherry Moon Zombie and Bill Moseley's character. The 3 of them are great. It's just a little unfortunate that Sid Haig couldn't do more in 3 from Hell, because I would have loved to have seen his character come back for more besides just that one scene he was in. But going back to Rob Zombie's directing style in this movie, like I said, this is the movie where that over-the-top, disgusting, dingy style really came to fruition, and for some reason, it sucks you in. Like, you're disgusted with so many things that happen in this movie. This movie is trying to offend you, but yet you acknowledge that you're supposed to be because you're following a group of murderous psychopaths. It's so hard to describe, but for some reason it works in this film. And the movie did give a great ending to these characters that I'm not going to spoil just in case you haven't seen it. It's just a little unfortunate that 3 from Hell kind of did away with that ending, because I thought the way they ended it here was satisfactory. And you could look at it as 3 from Hell didn't happen. You know, you don't have to watch 3 from Hell, but it's, again, I'm saying this word again, frustrating, because this was a great ending for these characters, and I enjoyed the journey going to this ending, unlike 3 from Hell, where I enjoyed the journey for the most part, but didn't really like the ending. So, I don't know, I'm rambling on at this point, but Devil's Rejects is very entertaining. It's disgusting, it's terrifying, it's got over-the-top dialogue, over-the-top characters, shocking elements. that type of shocksploitation horror. If that's your thing, then Devil's Rejects has definitely got you covered. But my personal favorite Rob Zombie movie, people may disagree with this, but that is perfectly fine. This is my opinion, and my opinion is I really liked The Lords of Salem. This is Rob Zombie not making a Rob Zombie movie, in my opinion, with Rob Zombie elements in it. And that's the best way I could describe it. Everything that he's known for directing his movies is toned down considerably, yet still is pretty shocking and pretty intense. There's no over-the-top swearing and over-the-top cringy dialogue, although there might be some here and there, but it serves more to the story instead of just grating at your last nerves. The characters are more likable here. The cinematography is really good here. I know Rob Zombie has said in interviews he doesn't really care for that that type of cinematography where you got a lot of wide shots and steady cam shots. He likes things really grungy, really dirty, really in your face, and I can respect that, but at least he admitted that that's what he likes to do, so I can respect that. But the cinematography here, he needs to do more of that, because there are some gorgeous shots here. In fact, I read a comment that said if you slap A24's logo on this movie, then people would appreciate this movie more. And I thought about that, and I was like, you know what, it does kind of feel like this movie is an A24 horror movie, just with Rob Zombie directing it. And I like A24 horror movies, so that's a good combination for me. To me, this film had the best combination of Rob Zombie tropes that he does in this film, on top of a more mainstream style and, I guess, story that you would see in like more mainstream horror films, which, Rob Zombie films, they are not mainstream, so you could look at it as he's selling out by making a movie like this, but I didn't see it as selling out at all. I see it as Rob Zombie just making a different type of horror movie, and I like when I see directors step away from their comfort zone a little bit more, hence why I think this is his best movie. This is a more mature horror movie than his previous other ones. While his previous other ones have their enjoyments and parts that are terrible, this is a more conventional horror film. So if you're not on board with Rob Zombie's style as a director or just the style of his films overall, maybe check out The Lords of Salem. It's definitely got those tropes in it that are gonna make you roll your eyes, but they're toned down considerably, and it makes for a pretty enjoyable film in my opinion. I did like the story overall, and I did like the characters, so yeah, I'm definitely going to be revisiting the Lords of Salem again very soon, because this film has stuck with me more so than his other films did. So that is it, guys. That is my ranking of all of Rob Zombie's written and directed films. I will say this though, even though I've got my favorites and least favorites, I have opened up a lot more to Rob Zombie as a director. There was a point where I just didn't want to deal with Rob Zombie's films because I just didn't care for his style. But after going through his movies, I do respect him a lot as a filmmaker. He's very controversial, and there's things that I just downright don't like about some of his films, but I do respect him a lot more as a filmmaker. So if I take away anything from watching his films, it's the fact that I do respect him a lot more as a filmmaker, and I am curious to see what he's going to do next. So guys, just like always, let me know in the comment section how you would rank his films if you've seen them. And just like always, guys, thank you again so much for watching. I apologize that I haven't been doing much videos lately, but there have been some things going on that I've been focusing on a little bit more than doing YouTube stuff. Maybe I'll go into it a little bit more once things settle a little bit, but I am going to try to do more videos for the month of October, now that it's Halloween and horror season. So look forward to more videos very soon. Thank you guys again for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and share it. Subscribe right here if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, take care.